So I've spent over 30 years studying how people get influenced, how people get manipulated, and how people get hypnotized without even realizing it's happening. And when I sat down and watched Louis Theroux's documentary about the Manosphere, honestly, it was like watching a textbook play out in real time. Because what most people see when they watch this documentary is a bunch of controversial guys saying controversial things. But that's not what I saw. What I saw were techniques, actual, specific, psychological techniques being used. And I don't think most people watching have any idea what they're really looking at. So I want to break it down for you. I'm going to show you the 4 techniques these influencers use to pull young men in and keep them there. And I'm going to do it from a behavioural science perspective, not a moral one. And before we get into it, I just want to be really clear about something. This is not me telling you these men are bad people. This isn't a political video. It's not a feminist rant. It's not wagging my finger at anyone. I'm a behavioural expert. What I do is look at how influence works, like the actual mechanics of it. How do you get someone to believe something? How do you get them to change their behaviour? How do you get them to feel like they're part of something? And when I watched this documentary, I wasn't just thinking these guys are terrible. I was thinking, oh, that's clever, and that's really clever. Because the techniques they're using, they're the same ones you see in cults, in political propaganda, in advertising, even in some of the biggest brands in the world. So whether you love these guys or you can't stand them, that doesn't matter for what we're doing here. What matters is that by the end of this video, you'll be able to see exactly what's happening and how it works. And once you can see it, it kind of loses its power. So let's get into it. So the first thing every influence system does, and I mean every single one, whether it's religion, a political movement, or a gym brand, it gives you a label. It gives you a way to describe yourself. And in the manosphere, you see this everywhere. High value man, alpha, red-pilled, awakened. Now, that might sound harmless, right? It's just words. But here's what's actually happening in your brain when you accept one of those labels. The moment you start thinking of yourself as a high-value man or as somebody who is red-pilled, your brain starts doing this thing where it filters everything through that identity. So if someone challenges that idea, it doesn't feel that they're disagreeing with an opinion anymore. It feels like they are attacking you, like who you actually are. And that's really important to understand because it's the reason these movements are so hard to argue with. You're not arguing with an idea, you are arguing with someone's sense of self. And people will defend who they are way more fiercely than they'll defend what they think. So what these influencers are really doing, and they might not even have the language for it, but they're doing it instinctively, is that they're not selling you a philosophy or a set of rules about how to live. They're selling you a version of yourself, a better, stronger, more powerful version. And once you've bought into that version of yourself, you'll defend it for free. You'll go into comment sections and argue on their behalf without being asked, because it doesn't feel like they're defending them. It feels like they're defending themselves. Okay, so now you've got your new identity. You know who you are. You're a high value man. But that on its own isn't enough. Because every identity or group needs to push against. You need an us and a them. And this is where the enemy comes in. If you watch the Manosphere And this documentary shows it really clearly. There's always someone to blame. Sometimes it's feminism, sometimes it's the mainstream media, sometimes it's beta males, sometimes it's just women in general. The specific enemy changes depending on the day, but there's always one. And the reason that works so well is because it does three things at the same time. First, it gives you an explanation as to why things aren't going well. Like you're struggling with relationships, or you feel a bit lost, or things aren't clicking. Suddenly, there's a reason. And the reason isn't you, it's them, it's the system, it's feminism, it's whatever. Second, it gives you a sense of belonging because now you're part of a group that gets it. You're in something that other people can't see yet. And that feels really good, especially if you've been feeling isolated. And third, this is the really sneaky one, it makes it almost impossible to leave because if you walk away from the group, where are you going? You're going back to them. You're joining the enemy. You're becoming one of the people you've been taught to look down on. So watch this documentary and pay attention to how often conversation shifts from here's how to be better to here's who's stopping you. That shift is the moment where helpful advice starts becoming something else because angry people don't leave groups. Angry people share content. Angry people recruit their friends. Anger is basically the most profitable emotion on the internet right now. And these guys know it.
I don't think women should vote. Also, I don't think women should be in the military or in law enforcement.
I do what the f- I want to do. She's loyal to me. It's monogamous on her end, open on my end.
She packs my f***ing condoms when I travel. That's how real it is.
So now you've got your identity, you've got your enemy, but you still need a path. You need someone to tell you what to actually do. And this is where it gets really seductive because these influencers give you rules. Clear, simple, black and white rules. Women are like this. Men should do that. Follow these steps and you'll be successful. And I'll be honest with you, some of the basic stuff isn't bad advice. Get in shape, build your confidence, take responsibility for your life. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just solid self-help. But that's the gateway. That sensible advice is what builds the trust. It's what makes you think, okay, this person knows what they're talking about. And then once the trust is established, the rules slowly start to get more extreme, more rigid, more absolute. And you don't really notice because each step feels quite small. And here's the thing about why simple answers are so appealing. When you're confused, when you're going through a rough patch, relationships aren't working, or you feel a bit lost, your brain is literally craving certainty, like it's a neurological thing. Your brain finds uncertainty really uncomfortable, almost threatening. And so when someone comes along and says, here's exactly how the world works, here's exactly what you need to do, that feels good. It's like scratching an itch. The problem is real life isn't simple. Love isn't simple. Masculinity isn't simple. Finding your purpose isn't simple. And when you flatten all of that complexity into a set of rules that fit in a TikTok video, you end up with answers that work just well enough to keep you hooked, but just badly enough that you always need to come back for more. What's coming up next is the part that really blew my mind when I was watching this. Okay, so this last technique is the one that holds the whole thing together because the identity, the enemy, the simple rules, they get you through the door. But this is what keeps you in the room. Just watch how these men present themselves. The cars, the money, the lifestyle, the women, and above all, this absolute certainty about everything they say. They never hesitate. They never say, I'm not sure, or it depends. They just state things like they are facts. And the reason that's so effective is because of something your brain does automatically. When you see someone who seems incredibly confident, your subconscious takes a shortcut. It goes, well, if they're that sure of themselves, they must know something that I don't. And you don't even realize you're doing it. It's the same reason con artists always look the part. It's the same reasons cult leaders speak with absolute certainty. Confidence triggers trust in your brain before your logical mind even has a chance to catch up. And then it creates this loop. You see their confidence, so you trust them, you follow their advice, maybe you get a small win, you feel a bit better, somebody notices you, whatever, and that small win makes you think it works, which pushes you deeper into the identity from technique 1, and round it goes. Not because the system actually works, but because once you're looking for evidence that it works, you'll find it everywhere. That's just how our brain is wired. So everything I've just described, right, you can find that in 100 YouTube videos and 1,000 TikToks. Those 4 techniques are running constantly across the Manosphere. But this documentary captures something that most content about this topic completely misses. It captures the moment where the mask actually slips.
Even with your good mate Jimmy Savile,
Come
mate.
on. Do you know what? I get Jimmy Savile energy from some of the Manosphere figures. Jimmy Savile used to refer to women.
So watch this moment really carefully, because this is where everything I've just explained plays out right in front of you in real time. The influencer brings up Jimmy Savile to Louis Theroux. Now, if you're just casually watching, that might seem like a bit of a dig, maybe a joke, maybe just him being a bit mouthy. But if you understand what's actually happening there, it's honestly one of the most textbook manipulation techniques you'll ever see on camera. It's something called guilt by association. It's really simple. You don't need to prove someone has done anything wrong. You just need to put them next to something the audience already has strong negative feelings about. And the emotional connection does the rest. Louis Theroux made a documentary about Savile years ago. That's just a fact. But watch how that fact gets used. It's not being mentioned as context or background. It's being used to contaminate. As if being near Savile somehow says something about Theroux. And what's really going on in that moment is the influencer is being challenged. He's on camera, his ideas are being questioned by someone who is calm and credible, and he can feel that he's losing the room a bit. So instead of engaging with what Louis is actually asking, he redirects the emotion. Because if everybody in the room is suddenly thinking about Savile, they've completely forgotten about the question. It's basically the equivalent of pulling a fire alarm during an exam. You don't pass the exam, but at least nobody else notices your answers. But the Savile comment isn't the only thing that's happening in that room. If you watch the body language, and I mean really watch it, you'll see there's a whole performance going on underneath the conversation. When Louis walks in, the influencer doesn't even look up. He's sat there watching some clip on someone else's phone, completely ignoring the fact that a camera crew has just walked into his room. So you've got to ask yourself, is that real? Is he genuinely so interested in that clip that he hasn't noticed that Louis Theroux and a camera crew has walked in? Absolutely not. That's a deliberate power move. It's his way of saying, you are not important enough for me to stop what I'm doing. And you see this kind of thing in all sorts of environments, boardrooms, prisons, anywhere people are competing for status. You control the room by controlling your attention. You make the other person wait by showing them where they sit in your hierarchy. And it carries through on the whole interaction. The long silences, the hard staring, the way he flips between being really quiet and suddenly aggressive. All of this is designed to keep Louis off balance, to intimidate him. But that's not what confidence actually looks like. Genuinely confident people don't need to do any of that. They don't need to make someone else feel small for them to feel big. What you're actually watching is someone who is working really hard to look powerful. And when someone's working that hard, it tells you it doesn't come naturally and that they do not feel powerful. But the part that really fascinated me is what happens when his mum is in the room. Because when Mummy shows up, he changes. He gets bolder, he gets louder, he's more confrontational with Louis, and he pushes harder. And when I was watching this, I was thinking, wow, that is so interesting, because think about what this man does for a living. He has built an entire brand telling other men how to be dominant, how to be an alpha, how women should behave, how men should be the ones in charge. And the person who gives him the confidence to perform all of that, the person whose presence makes him feel powerful enough to do it, is his mom. He's not performing for Louis, he's performing for her. He's showing her that he's the man he says he is online. And if you watch how he actually interacts with her, it's so telling. He listens to her, he respects her, and he defers to her. So I just want you to ask a really simple question. If this man truly believed what he says about women, if he genuinely thought women were inferior or that men should dominate them, would he act like that around his mother? Or is the whole thing just an act? And it's not just him. There's another influencer in this documentary whose own partner came out and said he's completely different in person, in private. That behind the camera, behind the content, behind the whole alpha thing, he's not like that at all.
Somebody in front of the cameras, but behind them is somebody else with me.
And once you see that, the whole picture changes, because you realise it's not just one guy putting on a show. They're all putting on a show. They've looked at somebody like Tate and they've seen the followers, the money, the cars, the status, and they've thought, I want that. I can do that. And the quickest way to get it is to say extreme things about women, because that's what gets the views, that's what gets the engagement, that's what gets other men looking up at you. And suddenly, overnight, you can become an alpha. Not because you've done anything, not because you've earned anything, and quite obviously, not because you believe any of it, but because the algorithm rewards it. And here's where it gets really interesting from a psychology perspective. Remember technique 1, identity installation. It works on them too. Once they've built this persona, once their income depends on it and their followers expect it, they can't stop. They're stuck performing this version of themselves, whether they believe it or not. They're not just influencing their followers. They're caught in the exact same trap. And you know what I love about the way Louis Theroux handles all of this? He barely says anything. He doesn't argue with them. He doesn't try to catch them out. He doesn't try to win them over. He just asks a question and then stands there and lets them talk. And they just reveal themselves. Every power play, every attempt to intimidate him, every time they try to make him feel small, all it actually does is show you how shaky the whole thing is underneath. Because genuinely strong people don't need to dominate every room they walk into. Genuinely confident people don't need to make someone else feel less than them. And Louis clearly knows that. That's why he just stays quiet and lets it happen. Because silence is the one thing performance cannot survive. So when you put all of this together, the power plays, the intimidation, the mummy thing, the partner saying that they are a different person in private, the Savile deflection, what you're really looking at is the moment that influence crosses a line and becomes manipulation. And I think this is the part that's really important, because some of the basic advice in the Manosphere is genuinely not bad. Get in shape, build confidence, have standards, take responsibility for your life. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But that advice is the door. And once you walk through it, the room starts to change around you. The confidence slowly turns into contempt. The standards turn into control. The self-improvement becomes this sense of superiority over everyone else. And the men following these influencers don't really notice it happening because each step is so small. Each little escalation feels totally justified at the time. And that, honestly, is how radicalization works. It's never one big dramatic moment where someone sits you down and says, right, now you're going to become extreme. It's 1,000 tiny steps. Each one feels completely reasonable. And the men at the top, the ones supposedly living the dream, they're performing for views. Their own partners say they're different behind closed doors.
No, you don't have to have a juice. They'll have shots.
Mummy, I don't want a juice bar. All right?
Don't embarrass me. All right, don't be rude.
They get their confidence from their mum. They pull fire alarms when somebody asks them a difficult question. So the question isn't really whether the Manosphere is right or wrong. The question is, who benefits from you believing that it is? If you're a young man watching this, or if you know a young man who's got really deep into this world, I'm not asking you to reject everything you've heard. I'm really not. I'm just asking you to start to notice a few things. Notice when advice starts turning into anger. Notice when self-improvement starts running into blaming someone else. Notice when someone who seems incredibly confident on camera turns out to be completely different when off camera. Because all of those techniques I've walked you through, they only work if you can't see them. And now you can. These techniques are everywhere. They are in religions, in community, in business networking groups. The question is always the same. Who benefits from you believing what they are saying?